For every sensory system and for the motor system, axons, many of them, cross from one side of the brain to the other. These crossings are referred to as decussations. For many of the sensory systems, particularly in humans, the decussations are incomplete. So we're looking on the ventral surface of the human brain. This would be as though we had looked into the brain by carving out the roof of someone's mouth. Okay, so here we go. The eyes would be sitting right about here. And we can see a few things. So this tiny structure right there, it's called the olfactory bulb. And it is a much diminished structure in us. If this were a mouse, a cat, and we were to look at it proportionally, the olfactory bulb would be about that big. So just a greatly, greatly diminished structure. This is where I really wanted you to pay attention, though. It's back here along this line. So I've just drawn a line right through the middle of the optic nerve. And it's the optic nerve on one side. And what's going to happen is that, let's draw two axons just for fun. We've got two axons, and they're running in the optic nerve. And one of these axons is going to stay on the same side, and it's going to enter the structure back here, which is the optic tract. Okay, so this axon has remained on the same side of the brain, gone from nerve to tract. The other axon, the one in black, that guy is going to cross over in the midline and enter the optic nerve on the other side. Where it's going to cross is a structure that's called the optic chiasm. So the optic chiasm contains the axons coming from each of the two retinae. A little bit more than half of the axons from each of the two retinae in a human crosses and goes over to the other side. So if I use yet a third color, we would have an axon on this side that would cross over and join the guy in green. And so that means in each of the optic tracts are axons from both retinae. So axons cross in the midline here in the optic chiasm, and that crossing is an incomplete decussation. Not every axon crosses, and so what we have in the visual system is an incomplete decussation. Now what it's going to do eventually, not where these axons terminate, they're going to terminate back here in the thalamus, but by the time we get to the primary visual area of cortex we call V1, the inputs from the two eyes are going to come together. It's going to form neurons that have binocular responses. They'll respond to each of the two eyes. And the reason that's so very important is that produces something called stereopsis, looking at the world with two eyes, which is instrumental, the primary way that we have depth perception. So the incomplete decussation in the visual system is critical for this property of binocularity, which is a critical component to your ability to see in depth. For the auditory system, we have a similar incomplete decussation. So here we have axons, cell bodies that are present in the cochlear nuclei. They're getting inputs from axons of the spiral ganglion. So what's missing here is the spiral ganglion. Let's go ahead and put it right there. It's actually buried in the cochlea itself, so I've artificially taken it out of the cochlea and put it out here. But those axons from the spiral ganglion innervate the cochlear nuclei. So that means neurons in the cochlear nuclei are monaural. That means they're getting inputs from one ear only. But the cell bodies in here do a couple of interesting things. So some neurons, cochlear nuclei, send their axons in such a way that they terminate ipsilaterally on the same side. Ipsilateral means same side. Terminate ipsilaterally in a complex, a nucleus, a pair of nuclei in the superior olive. Now that's fine. That's what that red arrow shows you there. Some neurons, however, send their axons across the midline to terminate in the superior olive of the contralateral side. This fiber tract in which those axons cross is called a trapezoid body. It truly is trapezoidal, and that's the reason it's called a trapezoid body. Okay, so that's that one side. What about the other side? Same thing. Cochlear nuclei, so we're going to have spiral ganglion, axons going here, cochlear nuclei, axons that stay on the same side, and axons that cross to go to the other side. Now what that means in the superior olive, and there are two halves to it that we'll talk about later. So in the SO, superior olive, you now have neurons that are binaural. These are neurons that are going to respond to sounds that fall upon each of the two ears. And that binaurality is going to be then conveyed forward to the rest of the auditory brainstem. The inferior colliculus is found in the midbrain, so it's part of the auditory brainstem, and on into auditory thalamus, and then eventually into auditory cortex. So binaurality is going to be important, and the key reason that binaurality, the response to the two ears, is so important is it will allow you to figure out the sound source, at least the sound source in the horizontal plane. Is it to the right? Is it to the left? Is it right down the middle? So binaurality will allow you to do that. In the SO, the superior olive, getting inputs from the cochlear nucleus on the same side and the cochlear nucleus on the other side. The neurons in the SO are going to use features of sound. So what is the intensity of sound that falls upon the two ears? And what's the timing of sound that strikes the two ears? The SO will use those cues in order to figure out sound source.